Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about QA engineers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, wouldn't you say that a test engineer is being also a software engineer to a degree? A very simplified engineer who tests logic, which is mainly what a software engineer do along along with all the other projects, but in a more complex and purposeful way. Granted, software developer can exist. Granted, software can exist without testing, but not the inverse. But if certain testing engineers doesn't like the stigma, he could just learn more about programming and become a software developer. So for this to make a bit of sense, this was posted on a video I made, which is called "Why Do Software Developers Look Down on Testers?" And the very short version of that is because I basically say that for some software developers, they look at testers as like doing something a monkey could do. And I even go as far as to say that depending on what level of testing a person is performing, then yes, that is true, because I can get my mom, who basically knows she doesn't know how to turn on her computer without calling me, to help me with verifying that a website's button is working. But the really good QA people, like the people who actually know their shit, they're usually involved in more advanced forms of testing. But the vast majority of QA engineers are doing very basic things in comparison to what a software developer is doing. I will go as far as to say that on average, anything that a QA engineer can help the average software company with, a software developer will be able to do. Apart from these domain-specific things, and we're going to touch on that as well. So what I told the subscriber is basically that yes, in the broadest possible definition, you could say that a QA engineer or something like that is basically a software engineer. But in my opinion, at the very least, that is similar to saying that someone who has taken a boot camp as a software developer, that they are a professional software developer. Technically, you are correct, because all you have to do is to take a boot camp and then get one paying gig, and now you're a professional software developer. And trust me when I say this, guys, I have interviewed hundreds of candidates who think that way, and it is embarrassing to interview them for a position at a serious IT company when they come in and they can't even answer what HTTP is, because all they know is that there's a fetch method in JavaScript, and that does something with something called the network. That's what they call professional. It's for the vast majority of the industry, it's laughably, it's hilariously too little knowledge to be able to do serious work. And so that level is usually the level that you can expect of a QA engineer in terms of software skills, because most of what they are doing, if they're doing actual coding, is to automate tests. And the logic to automate tests, if let's say that you're using Cypress or Selenium WebDriver, Puppeteer or Playwright, it doesn't really matter which one you're using. The logic to do that is like nothing in comparison to what you have to write in order to make the business logic. It is, I like to say that a software developer who studies for 6 months will know more about coding than a QA engineer who has worked for years. On average, in terms of coding, unless they are, of course, themselves developers. Because that's the thing, right? You don't have to be a QA engineer can, I work with people like that. They used to be QA engineers, they thought the software thing was pretty cool, and so they studied really hard, and then they became software developers. And I have software developer friends who used to be they were programmers, and they thought, I can't really deal with all the noise about being a rock star and all that stuff. So they went into QA work. So, it is interchangeable. It really comes down to what level could you kind of on average expect in terms of coding skills. And on average, a QA engineer does not possess the same level of coding skills as a software developer. But to give you as an example, if a software developer is a race car driver, then the QA engineer is a Formula One driver versus someone who rides go-karts or something like that. They are doing the same sort of thing, but at very, very different levels. The best QAs, that I know, that the people who really make the difference usually, if we talk about like, we're going to touch on like what I think though is so great about having a QA, but like the really, really great ones, they are usually people who have very good understanding of things that are outside of what a software developer knows. An example would be compliance testing. Compliance is a bitch and a half. It's super tricky. It's about figuring out, okay, this infrastructure and like all of this stuff that we have to validate, and like legal aspects and things like that. To set up a testing strategy that validates that your company is not breaking the law, that is hard. That's damn hard. And a QA, well, that's the sort of person who should be dealing with that, if you ask me. Another one that might be closer to home is accessibility. Accessibility is very hard, and there's no way to completely automate accessibility testing. You can use like tests, like automated Axe libraries, or maybe Lighthouse, or like there are a few methods for you to do some of it in an automatic fashion. But at the end of the day, some things are simply too complicated to be able to completely automate. So if you have a QA who really knows what the standards of like the web standards for accessibility and like legal requirements, because sometimes there's legal requirements as well. Usually companies hire, like they actually buy this from agencies with like QAs who know this stuff, and go and they like test their website so that they can deploy in markets or like in countries where this is a requirement. That is something a developer doesn't know anything about. But writing the Selenium test or the whatever end-to-end test that you're writing, that the developer can do. Not like that's not even a little bit tricky for them. And so that's what the average, because the thing I don't want you to think, which is, that's what I don't like when you have this whole stigma between, oh yeah, you're a tester, you're nothing in comparison to me as a software developer. It's that whole battle, oh, I'm more advanced, I know more stuff about this thing that is just a part of what you do, and therefore I'm better than you. I don't like that. What the regular QAs who usually do the testing are very valuable, like what their purpose is to save us time. Because it takes a long time to develop all the tests and maintain them and all the feature files and like all this, depending on how, if you're using like BDD and Gherkin syntax, or if you're like however you're doing it, right? It's a lot of work. It's similar to like the guys at Google, they have people who are full-time hires to do documentation because they have so much of it. They're not developers. But let's ask the developers, guys, do you want to spend all your time updating documentation? No, you want to code. But me, as the person who owns the company, I need someone to write the documentation. So can't we just agree on that there's this person here who's actually really interested in that stuff and does it really well? Can we just respect that person's choices and say, you know what? We're going to pay you to do that because we need it. And let's just call that a day. I think that would be super nice. So what I want you to take away from this is that in a very broad sense, yes, a QA engineer can be considered a form of a software developer, but I don't think that it's fair to say that they're on the same level, because the fact of the matter, the coding that is usually happening for a QA engineer is very basic in comparison to what you have to do as a software developer. It's the same. It's basically the same level as a bootcamp level software developer. And I'm one of those people who feel like, I think that we should respect people's choices in life and just accept that given the right circumstances and given like if they care enough, they will be able to progress basically to the same level as anybody else, because there's very few people who are superhumanly gifted. We like to think that because that makes our ego go all wild and crazy, but usually people are just people, and it's down to interests and like opportunities and compromises and all this other good stuff that comes with life. And just call that. And then on the other side of things, let's not pretend like every single person, regardless of where we find, what context we are in, is equally valuable. Because that's not fair either. It's not fair to say that someone who does testing is equally important to the process of software development as someone who writes the code. It doesn't make any sense. That's just feel-good nonsense, in my opinion. But at the same time, I mean, if you take a software developer and what you need is a doctor who can save somebody's life, they're going to be out of their depth as well. So You can always change the context to favor whatever viewpoint you want. So that's all I have to say about that, basically. I think that QAs have a very important role to play, and the good ones, they are very, very important, because some stuff is so complicated to test that most software developers, they have no fucking clue how to do it. And let's just call it that. Have a great day.